Clean bill and some other issues as well. Shannon Pettypiece, White House reporter at Bloomberg. Jay Herman, senior writer at Politico, and Hugh Hewitt, conservative talk radio host, also anchor of his own show here on MSNBC every Saturday morning. Jake, let me start with you. I'm curious there, the speaker saying that there won't be any sneaky things. To which sneaky things is he referring, Jake?
Well, you could do a lot of sneaky things in a government funding bill, but he's generally right. This is a pretty plain and simple government funding bill to avert a shutdown that would happen tomorrow night absent this bill. So this is just keeping government open until the new year, until about 3/4 of the way through January, where Congress will have to deal with not only this, but an immigration deal, a deal to bolster Obamacare markets, potentially a debt limit deal. I mean, January is going to be really, really bad up here. And this is just punt formation. This just kicks the can a little bit down the road so people can get home for Christmas and the holidays. You
mentioned DACA. You mentioned Obamacare. There's a surveillance program that Casey was just talking about there, Jake. What kind of risk does this punting that you talk about, what kind of risk does punting all of these issues to next year, what does that mean for Republicans?
It just means they're going to have to do some big fat deal sometime in January that deals with all the things on that screen right now, and that's dangerous because conservatives don't like big bills in the first place, and they don't like the particulars of what they're going to have to deal with in January. So they are not unified on immigration. They are not unified on FISA and government surveillance. They are not unified on pouring money into these states like Texas and Florida, which they've done to the tune of almost a couple $100 billion. So this is going to be a month in which Republicans need Democrats and need to get on the same page. But listen, we thought this month was going to be bad. I think January is going to be even worse.
Hugh, what is it that makes CHIP, children's health insurance, what makes that and supplemental disaster, those two things specifically, what makes it so difficult to just get those things done?
Well, I don't think it will be. I think there are two bills on the floor of the House right now. One will extend CHIP through March. One will extend the disaster relief necessary to Puerto Rico, Florida, Texas, the fires in California. I think what's going on, the pause here, is that the alternative, a comprehensive spending bill, is complicated, would keep them in town. And the Speaker and Leader McCarthy and Senate Majority Leader McConnell and the President all want to do a victory lap. They want to do about 10 victory laps. They want to talk about AT&T and Comcast giving bonuses. They want to talk about Boeing, Wells Fargo giving raises and minimum wage going up at First, Third, Fifth Capital Bank. They want to focus for the next 30 days on the amazing effects of this tax bill. To get into a shutdown right now would step on their own story. So message discipline is actually being focused on right now, and I applaud them for this. The only people who are really critical, Craig, are the defense hawks. They were promised that the National Defense Authorization Act would be, which passed under President Trump, would be fully funded in the next bill. They're only going to get about $6 billion in necessary emergency assistance in the stopgap. So they're the part of the caucus, not really the Freedom Caucus, that is upset, but rather that amount of pain than stepping on the story of tax relief that we haven't seen for 3 decades.
Shannon, Paul Ryan, House Speaker Ryan, saying that the next mission after tax cuts will be cutting spending on entitlements like Medicare. Today, Mitch McConnell appeared not to agree with the Speaker. Listen to how the two have framed the next debate, and we'll talk about it on the other side.
Well, I think the Democrats are not going to be interested in entitlement reform. So I would not expect to see that on the agenda.
The kinds of entitlement reforms I think that we're going to be pursuing are the kinds that help make sure we get people from welfare to work. We're focused on getting people from welfare to work. More importantly, to get people from welfare to work.
It would seem as if the Speaker's mantra is getting people from welfare to work there, Shannon Pettypiece. But are Republicans unified around a game plan after tax cuts?
Absolutely not, especially on entitlement reform. And when Jake was talking about how if you thought this month or even this year was tough, when you start getting into issues like entitlement reforms, not to mention immigration, you see some major fractions in the Republican Party, not to mention the type of opposition you would see from Democrats. I think an easy thing to go forward on would be infrastructure. A lot of people argue that's something the president should have gone after right out the gate to build some unity. That's an easy thing they could pick up right now. But yeah, throwing entitlements into the mix right now, there's so much division. It's such an emotional issue, and it's the same for immigration. These have sort of been the third rail of politics. It doesn't mean they shouldn't try or shouldn't do them, but it's going to be ugly and it's going to be a long slog if they try and take those on.
Shannon, sometimes it seems like the only people who talk about an infrastructure bill getting passed in Washington are actually journalists. Why is infrastructure so hard to do? It would seem to be a no-brainer to a lot of folks who casually observe Washington.
Well, I would say journalists and Gary Cohn, he loves to talk about infrastructure, and President Trump likes to talk about it as well, too. But, you know, it's not sexy, first of all. Everybody loves new roads and bridges, but there's a big hitch. You have to pay for them, and that's where we get it in the holdup every time. With Obama, when he tried to do his infrastructure bill, it could have been bigger, but no one wants to pay for it. And, of course, one way you could pay for that is cutting things on the other end, and then you get into entitlement reforms, and now you're quickly going down the slope of, you know, how do we get this done? But the White House, from day one, there are people in the White House who've been looking at this, studying it, talking about it. Gary Cohn's one of the people who have led it. That doesn't necessarily mean it's going to get done, but it is something that there is a group of people in the administration who they have seriously been looking.
Hugh, National Journal had an interesting article in the wake of the big tax win. There's a look at the article there. Americans are voting their values, not their pocketbooks, and Trump's conduct in office is the defining issue in the country. Could the president's conduct ultimately undercut the GOP's win on taxes, Hugh?
Yes, of course. In the absence of accomplishment, attitude becomes everything, Craig. And until this tax bill passed, even though you had things like Justice Gorsuch and 12 appellate court judges, people didn't see accomplishments. But now that it's been passed, the president has either delivered in whole or part on every one of his major promises in 2016, with the exception of a 350-ship Navy, which is why, by the way, going back to what you said earlier, I do not see entitlement reform being on the agenda in 2018. I see a 350-ship Navy and a fully funded Department of Defense, so that President Trump can say, forget about the noise on Twitter. You may not like me. You may not care much for me. But are you better off? And did I deliver on my promises? I think that's going to be a powerful appeal in 2018.
Well, Hugh, I would point out, though, that he also promised to close the carried interest loophole, and he didn't do that. But, Hugh,
you're absolutely right.
Hugh, good to see you.